In this week's video, I'm going to be talking about my tongue piercings and telling you my experience with getting the piercings, the healing process, and also giving you a few tips if you're thinking about getting your tongue pierced or if you have it pierced already. I got my first tongue piercing in 2013 when I was on holidays in New Zealand. I got it done on my birthday. I got my 2 conch piercings and my tongue piercing on the same day. So I went into the piercing shop and I was really crapping myself thinking that the tongue piercing was going to hurt a lot. So I got my 2 conch piercings first to get the easy ones out of the way. And I was very mistaken. The conch piercings hurt a lot. And then when it came down to getting my tongue pierced, I was very surprised. It didn't hurt anywhere near as much as I thought it was going to. But I can't really compare the pain or the feeling to any other piercings because it feels nothing like any other piercing. But if I could compare the pain comparison, it hurts a lot less than a nose or a cartilage piercing. But everybody's going to experience pain very differently. So my experience might not be the same as your experience if you were to get it done. The healing process for my first tongue piercing, it was really good. Directly after getting my tongue pierced, it felt like I was going to swallow my tongue. And it took a little while to get used to having the bar in my tongue, but that's completely normal. It just feels really weird because the bar that they will put in there is very long, and that's to allow for swelling. So the next day, my tongue was pretty swollen and it was pretty painful to talk. I had a bit of a lisp going on and it was not very pleasant. And at this point, I didn't know the rule about not having dairy products after getting your tongue pierced. So I was having ice creams and things like that because the cold made it feel a lot better. But I didn't have any problems with having dairy products after my tongue got pierced, but it is definitely not worth the risk. And now, knowing that, I would definitely not suggest having dairy products directly after getting your tongue pierced because it can cause a yeast infection in your mouth. After about 2 days, I was eating bigger foods like meat pies. I had a lot of trouble eating things that you had to chew a lot because I had to move the food around in my mouth, and that made it a little bit more difficult to eat. But having hot foods after 2 days, it wasn't painful. It was just a little bit awkward because my tongue was still swollen and it was still a little bit painful. But while my tongue was healing, I was using a mouthwash that made my tongue a little bit numb, and that made it feel a lot better, especially when I went to bed. About 4 or 5 days after the piercing was done, my tongue was almost back to normal. It was a tiny little bit sensitive and a little bit swollen, but it was almost healed. And after 7 days, it was completely healed. And I went back to the piercing shop and the guy changed it to a shorter bar. And that made eating a whole lot easier. It was still not painful, but a little bit sensitive for about a week after it was completely healed. The webbing underneath my tongue is really far to the front of my tongue. So the piercing was done slightly on an angle just to avoid going through the web underneath my tongue. In 2015, I got my second tongue piercing, and that was done on the side of my tongue. And that one was really painful, but that's because the side of my tongue is a lot thicker than the middle of my tongue. And the healing process for that piercing absolutely sucked. My tongue swelled so much more than the first tongue piercing, and the jewelry had to be changed quite a few times while it was healing. It was extremely painful for about a week and a half, and it took about 3 to 4 weeks for it to completely heal. And even after it was completely healed, I still had a little bit of a bubble underneath my tongue. But now that has completely gone. And now that it's completely healed, I still have to have a longer bar where my tongue is pierced on the side, and that's because if I put a shorter bar in it, it starts to rub against my tongue and my tongue will swell or it'll get painful, and I eventually will have to put a longer bar in it. So now I just keep a longer bar in it. But the bar that's in it now is nowhere near as long as the bar that was put in after it was pierced, because the bar was about this long, and I am not kidding, it was massive. And that's because of how much my tongue swelled after the piercing. One of the things that I was worried about with getting my tongue pierced was losing the ability to do tongue tricks. And thankfully, that is not a problem. Yes, your tongue is a muscle, but getting your tongue pierced is not going to change anything that you can do with your tongue. And just to put it out there, you are not going to get a paralyzed tongue if you get your tongue pierced wrong. But still, please get your tongue pierced by a professional. If you're thinking about getting your tongue pierced, there are a few things that you need to think about before getting it done. You need to be aware that a tongue piercing can damage your teeth. And I have taken out my middle tongue piercing because of that reason. I was getting receding gums inside my mouth, so I took it out to avoid any further damage to my teeth. But the hole is still open and I can still get a bar through it, but I'm not going to leave it in there permanently. And if you're worried about the pain of getting your tongue pierced, please don't be. It's nowhere near as bad as you think it's going to be. And I guarantee you the worst part of a tongue piercing is the healing process. So getting it pierced is nothing compared to the week of discomfort of your tongue being swollen and being very, very, very difficult to eat food. But if you can stand that week of discomfort, a tongue piercing is a really, really good piercing to have. It's discreet, so even if you can't have piercings for work, a tongue piercing can be changed to a plastic bar, or even if you have a metal bar in it. It's not like you stick your tongue out while you're talking, so not many people are even going to know that you have your tongue pierced. And while I'm talking, not many people can actually pick up that I have my tongue pierced unless I've told them, or unless I am, for some reason, holding my tongue out while I'm talking. And if you're worried about bleeding to death with getting your tongue pierced, please don't be. That is a myth. There are no major arteries in your tongue that is going to cause you to bleed to death. Yes, if you have a vein underneath your tongue and you get a piercing through it, it is going to hurt like hell and it's going to bleed a lot, but I guarantee you, you are not going to bleed to death. If you have any questions about tongue piercings or piercings in general, please write them in the comments and I'm more than happy to help you if I can and answer any questions that you have. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all and I'll see you next week. Bye!